Okay, now we move from sticks, swords, knives, palm sticks, up into pole-length weapons, starting at about 4 foot-ish, going on out. This new length, this new whole span of lengths offers some new constraints and some new possibilities. Let's look first at the constraint. Okay, our first constraint is the fact that moving up from 3 feet to 4 feet means that this thing doesn't fit in as many places as it used to as you're navigating your environment. Now, let's talk first, before we talk about combat, let's talk about just navigating through your environment outside of combat. Maybe you're on your way to combat. Maybe you're moving through your house with the lever and you haven't really figured out where somebody you might fight is, but you're carrying it with you. You may not want to knock over a lamp as you're moving through the dark. You may not want to, in a fumbling way, begin to deploy your weapon before it's time to deploy it. This is a weighted staff. It's 10 pounds, much heavier than any staff that I would use to fight, but I do exercise with it quite a bit. It's sort of like using club bells or kettlebells. I do a lot of things with this, not just exercise, but try to enhance my feeling for a longer weapon. This thing weighs enough that if you hold it by the center point, by the balance point, it lets you know if you start to move it in a way that's not ergonomic and efficient as you move around the environment. I'll walk through my house with this thing, trying to dodge the furniture, change direction, and it really helps me learn to respect the mass of the weapon so that when I pick up a regular weighted weapon, first it feels like a toothpick, and second, I already have the habit of moving it in a very efficient way. Let me give you 3 examples. Think of 3 different kinds of movement. I can go forwards and backwards, I can go right to left, and I can rotate. Well, in each of those cases, I'm going to be making the staff travel, or in one case, not travel very much. Let's take twisting, rotation first. If I rotate, that means I'm rotating on my long axis, right? I'm turning and I'm turning. Well, if I keep the staff either in this grip, vertical, or in this grip, vertical, turning is not difficult because the staff is parallel to my rotation. It's right there. If I'm moving forwards and backwards, it makes more sense to hold it up here in a javelin position or down here like a farmer's carry with a kettlebell as I move around. Easy to move through your environment like this. If you feel the threat level coming up, you can move through your environment more like this. But because you're moving forwards and backwards, you want the line of the staff pointing forwards and backwards. If I suddenly decide to go sideways, maybe I am walking through a hallway and I have a turn, I might rotate my staff to point down the hallway and then start traveling that way. If I'm actually truly moving side to side, I'm still going to have the staff going this way and this way as I move because that's the direction of travel. If I'm here and I'm moving, it's possible, but it's likely I'm going to bash the staff into a wall or a corner as I'm doing that. So I always want to have it fitting through whatever space I'm going through, and I always want to maximize how easy it is to carry it. When I've learned these lessons through playing with this, it's really child's play to move through a cluttered environment with my weapon. So I thought I'd share that with you. I found that to be a truth that has really served me well as I train with longer and longer weapons. So what are some possibilities with this newer length? Well, first let's begin with some old material, and that is the center grip. With the center grip, I can shield even more effectively with a 4-foot lever than I can with a 3-foot lever. It covers higher up and it covers lower down as I shield with it. It's an even more stable missile as I'm flinging it through space. And as I move through these different applications of the center grip, how I manipulate it has evolved in different systems over time. And one thing you find a lot of is people executing twirling motions. And I used to think back in the day, even though I practiced this, it was fun, I thought this has no bearing on a fight whatsoever. It's just fun. It's good for showing off. But it actually is a good way of taking you through the various positions of how you might be using this in a fight in different ways. So the twirl is actually kind of useful, and I think it's a good thing to practice. You could also call the twirl an hourglass. Okay, so what else can we do with this thing? Well, we can put two hands on it, assuming there's no sharp or pointy parts up and down its length. And that's a big deal. I can use the entire 4 feet of my weapon if I can get two hands down close to one end of it. Now there's an extreme version of this. Really extreme would be one-handed, but an extreme two-handed version is your two hands here. Now, that's a niche grip. I won't use it a lot, but I will use it for power strokes to my opponent. But I will not use it for setting up power strokes with blade work or with staff work. I need to be able to not only exert power 4 feet away from my hands, or 3 feet at least, I need to be able to exert dexterity as my opponent exerts dexterity or attempts to out here, much like a fencer would. So how far apart I separate my hands, that's going to vary depending on the mass of the weapon and also on the length. You know, in Wing Chun Kung Fu, they use a 9-foot pole, right? So they grip pretty far apart as they're using it. You don't need to go so far apart for a 4-footer, but you don't want to have your hands so close together that you can't very sharply and quickly move the tip, throw the tip, thrust the tip, and so on. So this is really useful. But sooner or later, as you're playing this game, opponents are going to get past your tip and start to close with you. Now you have different options in that regard. My favorite is don't give up your staff. All you need to do is pull your rear hand back through the front hand like you're preparing to shoot a pool stroke and present the center section. If the opponent has gotten close enough to you to make this a reasonable possibility, a possible response, then he's not out here threatening you. He's closing in as well. So his body and his weapon present really good targets for fighting over this inside range, setting up attacks from the different ends for hooking and striking and so on. So it's almost like a mathematical formula. The further away your opponent is and the less ready he is with his weapon out, the closer together your hands can be. As he gets a little bit closer and he has his weapon out, you're fencing, much like a kendo artist might. If he gets past the tip, you have the advantage, unlike in kendo, which is using a blade, of coming back here and working in close. All of these are two-handed fighting methods with this. You can even, there are certain styles that will take up stances like this. And what they're doing essentially is they're keeping the lever out of the combat space so you can't knock it around. But then they'll thrust out at you from this position. And that's a valid way of using two hands as well. You could call it the pool cue method. It's not as high percentage as being out here, but it's great for pot shots from a safe distance. And finally, if my opponent grabs a hold of my weapon, which if I think I'm a lot better than my opponent at grappling and I don't see knives stored on his body, I may well want them to grab it. I might harass them, try to get them to grab it so I can reel them in and play what we call here at the Academy, two chimps on a stick. And if I can win that game, then having two hands on the weapon is part of how I learned to do that. There's a whole grappling game of two fighters fighting over a staff. So those are just a few of the ways that putting two hands on this thing can help you in a combat setting. Okay, so how many different ways can we make a pole-length weapon? This is a 5-foot staff that I sell on my website. I sell 5-foot length, 4-foot length, 6-foot length, and 7-foot. The reason I cut off at 7 feet has to do with what's plausible to get from my rattan supplier. Anything longer than 7 feet, shipping doubles the price of the rattan that I buy. So I tend to keep it at below 7 feet. But there's no reason you couldn't use an 8-foot pole arm or a 9-foot pole arm. Here I have a travel staff. This is about a 6-foot staff. And like a pool cue, it breaks down. Very handy if you're going to go to a seminar and you can't fit a staff in your car. Useful to have. Not great for heavy duty drills, but good for light drills. Here's a padded staff. This is made by Lameco Eskrima. Very nice. It's got enough flexibility in the rattan core. There is a solid rattan stick inside of here. It's got enough flexibility that there's less impact, and then the padding adds to that. You can go pretty hard, especially if you glove up with this thing. This is one of my favorite weapons. This is a 6 foot long. I'm going to show you the cross section. So it's got an edge, more or less, and a flat side. This is made out of a rare tropical hardwood. I don't know what it would take to break this, but it's a very powerful weapon. It's smooth as silk. Your hands can slide up and down it. I love training with this. It's a good workout and it's a lot of fun. Back in the 70s, a student of mine, when PVC wasn't that well known, said, "Dude, I got you a staff," and he brought me this piece of PVC, this heavy gauge wall. I've tried to break this thing through the years. It's really difficult to damage it in any way, and it makes a dandy 7-foot staff. Just to show that you don't need to spend a lot of money to have something good to train with. Here's a 4-footer that's padded. This is Action Flex. They make good training weaponry. Not good for going up and down its length like the padded staff was, but very good for two-handed swordsmanship techniques. These are trekking poles. Actually they're adjustable. I can set them to different lengths. And my favorite length tends to be about 4 feet long. They're really good for walking in ice and snow. They're kind of like ski poles, but they're made for walking instead of for skiing. And they will hold your body weight despite the fact that they're ultra lightweight, made out of aircraft aluminum. They will execute a really powerful slice using this titanium tip. It's not really a blade, but I've swung this against a wooden pell more than once, and it always draws splinters out when I use it. It served me in good stead once against a pretty vicious pit bull when I was out doing my morning walk. It was icy and snowy, so I was using my trekking poles, and I was able to ward off this beast without killing it using this. Very good for thrusting because of it's literally designed to be in your palm for a thrusting grip to hold up your weight. So an excellent improvised weapon and really good for not falling down in the snow. Here's a shinai. This is a very old model. It's just a little short, 2 inches short of being 4 feet long. So it's not truly a pole arm, but it's out long enough that 2 hands is what you want to use with it instead of 1 most of the time. And here's a little weapon I sort of built. It has a knife on one end. This is called a Bushman. I think Cold Steel makes it. And it's designed to be a standalone knife or an improvised spearhead. If you drive a nail in right there, it'll keep it on the stick. And I duct taped about 1 pound of lead down here at this end. And this creates a balance point right about here. It's really a nice weapon. I love the feel of this thing. It would be dandy for throwing, dandy for fighting. I wouldn't want to be in a fight with a guy using one of these. Anyway, that takes care of my video on pole length weapons. Hope you enjoyed that. Coming up next, we're going to move out of the realm of rigid combat levers and into the realm of flexible combat levers. Hope you enjoy it.